Okay, so in this set of videos or on this worksheet, we're going to look at the 4 different ways to find your trig functions in chapter 6. Like the other set of videos, the first 2 will be like the same idea, then 3 and 4 will be the same idea, 5 and 6 will be the same idea, or sorry, yeah, 5 and 6, and then 7 and 8 will be the same idea. So there's 4 ways to kind of solve these problems, but they're all kind of related. So the first step, no matter what the case is you have to draw your angle. Alright, so when I read this, it says find the exact value of each of the 6 trig functions to graph, or sorry, for the angle theta equals 145. So I guess the first step, we're always going to draw our angle. So I have my axes. Alright, no matter what, my initial side of the angle falls on the positive x-axis. Alright, so initial side. Now, if it's a positive angle, I'm going to turn up. If it's a negative angle, I'm going to turn down. Okay. Just as a quick reminder, we're at 0 degrees, 90, 180, and 270. Right. So, just as a little bit of reference, and also for the radian measures, this would be this would be 0 radians. This would be pi over 2. This would be pi, and this would be 3 pi over 2. Okay. So we got our initial side of our angle here at 0, and it says we're going to go 145 degrees. Now it's positive, so this is positive. 145 is between 90 and 180. 145. Now from here, after you draw the angle, the steps might be a little, well, 3 out of the 4 continue to have the same next step. From here, we're going to draw our reference triangle. Our reference triangle is always drawn from the angle down to the x-axis. It's always up and down, and it's always to the x-axis. Alright, so drop it down, and that makes a right angle with the axis. Okay. Now, once you do that, you got to find out what this angle is inside here, because again, this is our reference angle to help us with this triangle. So, if I've gone 145 degrees to here, the question is how much farther do I have to go to get to 180? Well, it's just going to be another 45. Right. So this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So the ordered pairs. Okay, so once we draw our triangle, the next step is to fill out the sides. Now that's where the couple different ways you can be given the information fall. Since I know this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle, I know what the sides of my triangle are. That's a special right triangle. We're going to be 1, 1, and root 2. Now, once we're here, I always make sure I label my sides if they're positive or negative. So here I went in the negative x direction. I went negative, so that's minus. Here I went up in the y direction, so that's positive. If I'd come down, that would be a negative y. But this is positive. And my hypotenuse, that is always going to be positive. Okay, so got my triangle labeled. And now I need to use my trig ratios. So that's where our SOHCAHTOA comes in. So I'm going to write it up here on top, just so we have it for reference. We have SOHCAHTOA. Alright, so when I want to do sine of 145, I don't know what that is, but it is going to be the same thing as sine of this 45-degree triangle in this quadrant. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite over hypotenuse, 1 over root 2. Now I don't like to leave it as 1 over root 2. I do want to turn it into, I want to have simplified so there's no radicals in the denominator. So to do that, I'm going to multiply by root 2 over root 2. So this becomes root 2 over 2. Cosine is now negative 1. It's this side, adjacent to our hypotenuse. Negative 1 over root 2. Well, same rule. It's just going to turn into root 2 over 2. However, this one's negative, so that one's going to be negative as well. And then lastly, tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent, which is 1 over negative 1. So that becomes negative 1. Now, the other thing you might want to know, in addition to the SOHCAHTOA, to get your reciprocal function, you need to know what they are. So sine of theta or really we should do, cosecant of theta is equal to 1 over sine of theta. They are reciprocal functions. So then secant of theta is 1 over cosine theta, and cotangent equals 1 over tangent. Again, these are the reciprocal identities, so they are also just the reciprocal of each. So when I'm trying to take sine, I'm going to take the reciprocal. The reciprocal just tells me to flip the fraction. Now, it's easier to take the reciprocal to unsimplified, because then you won't have to rationalize again. So here I'm going to become root 2 over 1, which is just root 2. Cosine is going to be root 2 over negative 1, which is negative root 2. And cotangent is negative 1 over 1, which is negative 1. So those are my 6 trig functions. You could also use like the opposite SOHCAHTOA. So cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite, cotangent is hypotenuse over adjacent, and tangent's adjacent over hypotenuse. Sorry, cotangent is. Or you could just kind of flip the fractions and go from there. Okay. One other thing I want to remind us of that will help us throughout the rest of this video and to kind of check our work is our little mnemonic device. We have our axes, and we say, hey, all students take calculus, and this tells us what is positive and negative in each quadrant. So A, that means all trig functions are positive. If I'm in the second quadrant, only sine, and it's reciprocal function, because as you notice, when you take the reciprocal, all you do is you flip the fraction. You don't change the sign at all. So if sine's positive, it's going to stay positive. If something's negative, the reciprocal is going to stay negative because you're just flipping the fraction. So sine and cosecant are positive in the second. Tangent and cotangent are positive in the third. And cosine and secant are positive in the third. So here we are in the second quadrant. Remember, quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4. We're in the second quadrant. So sine and cosecant should be positive, everything else should be negative. Positive, positive, negative, 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 negative. So we're good. So that's kind of how I always check my work. Okay? And that is number 1 on this worksheet.